Hello and welcome to the Zebra BI webinar. This is already webinar number 36 of the Zebra BI webinar series. I'm Andre, the CEO and founder at Zebra BI, and today I'll present advanced time intelligence functions and a lot of tricks that hopefully will make your reports and dashboards in Power BI more dynamic, more flexible, more understandable, more readable, and time intelligence is the basic feature that you want to get right in your data model. Okay, and it's kind of tricky to set up in Power BI once you go beyond the basic standard calendar that we all have in our Power BI models. So today I hope I'll reveal a couple of useful tips and tricks and some examples that hopefully you'll be able to recreate and use in your reports and dashboards. All right, let me just show you what we are going to build today. This will be a very practical session, so I'll type some DAX, right? Don't be scared, we'll do it slowly, but basically I want to build a couple of things here. So first of all, if you have a report or a dashboard like this, right, you probably have some, slicers on top for your dates. All right, this is the very first slicer that everybody has in Power BI. So, the selection of your month and years and dates and so on. All right, so for example, now what happens when you switch from April to May? Of course, you want everything on your report to change, right? Including charts. If you're presenting time series trends in your charts, in different types of charts like line charts, area charts, and so on. And regardless whether you're doing this with custom visuals or native visuals, right? You just want to make sure that the time series will reflect the selection here. But and then on top of that, in a typical business report, you may want to put the results or show the results for your month-to-date periods, and then also for the year-to-date periods, and perhaps even full year where you compare forecast to plan and so on, right? So these are typical business functions. Next, moving beyond the basics, right? You may want to have things like rolling periods. All right, so this time my chart does not start with January and ends in December, right? It actually starts from May and it goes to May. All right, so this is basically 13-month rolling period. Okay, and I can control it here simply by selecting another month, right? So now it goes from June last year to June this year, for example, and so on. This, of course, will work across years. You always have so you basically have a dynamic 13-month rolling period on your axis, and you can control the axis. So it's a completely dynamic axis in your charts. Okay, this is very useful for marketing reports, marketing dashboards, for example, market shares, things like market shares and so on, because you want to actually compare your current month, like, for example, June or July to the July next previous year, right? So basically, in the end, you actually have month-on-month growth here, right? Which is a really nice feature for marketing reports, market shares, and so on. And then also for operational reports, things like on-time delivery in percent and things like that. So very useful for operational reporting as well. And also, we will show how to create and control your fiscal calendars. Basically, you can have both the normal calendar and also the fiscal calendar all in one dimension in your Power BI model. So here at the bottom, I have my fiscal years. They start with April. So this is, you know, the fiscal year 2000, for example, and it starts in April, ends in March, and then the next fiscal year. And here we have the calendar years. Okay, so this is the scope. We'll try to build this, and today, so the agenda. First, why? I hope I show the motivation. That this sounds interesting, and we'll start with building the calendar and the basic period calculations, moving on to handling year-to-date periods in measures, and then handling open periods with forecasts. I'll explain this a little bit later. This is another problem that you have, like how to present your current period if you only have a few days worth of data, right? For the whole month, right? Because it's just, you know, the 5th or something like that. It's a special little, you know, problem in business reporting. Okay, rolling periods as dynamic axes in charts, fiscal calendar, and so on. Lots of practical examples, and the Q&A. All right, we are recording this, so you will get the recording as well as all the examples, the PBIX files. So we'll send you everything a couple of days after the webinar. All right, so I'm Andre, the founder at Zebra BI, and also a Microsoft Most Valuable Professional. I'm also a HICERT IBCS certified consultant. And today, Mark is with me. Mark, please present yourself. Mark is helping me prepare this, and he'll also monitor the your questions. Hi, Mark.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Yes, as Andre mentioned, I'll be monitoring your questions, trying to answer them during the session, and of course, at the end, at the Q&A, I'll try to pick some of the, let's say, more valuable ones for everyone, and then we'll try to address them.
All right. Thanks, Mark. So if everyone has, anybody has a question while I'm, you know, presenting, please just type your questions into the chat box, and Mark will monitor this and will handle them at the end. All right, let's get to work. Okay, so first of all, let's start with the beginning. Actually, I should say the real beginning of this webinar is in a related webinar. So let me first just share this. So as you probably know, we have the series of webinars. This is number 36 already, and we collect all the recordings on our web page. So if you go to zebrabi.com, under resources, you'll find the webinars here. And I just want to make sure that you know that we have the recording. So this is this one, but there's another webinar called Top 5 DAX Tricks. Voila, this is the one. So if you haven't watched this beforehand, okay, I definitely strongly recommend you to take a look at this recording as well, because it handles some other tricks, so it's kind of, you know, related. So definitely go here and also check this webinar as well. So I will not talk about how to create your basic calendars and so on. I'm just assuming that you already know this, but if not, yeah, please watch that other webinar, okay, when we explain this. So this time we are moving beyond the standard calendar. All right, so first of all, this is my calendar table. Okay, so my model in Power BI looks like this. So it's basically a star schema, all right, with two fact tables. So I have my values, all my measures here. So this is more or less financial type of report. So we have actual data and forecast data and plan data for revenue and income and so on. And then we have the calendar here. All right, so we have one calendar here. This is the standard calendar that has, you know, the dates, date ID, month numbers, quarters, year, and so on, right? Weekdays and so on. All right, so this is a standard daily calendar in Power BI. We will add another calendar, all right, today for rolling periods. I'll explain why you need a second calendar for that. And then we also have another table here, which is a disconnected table, and we call it the period calculation. Okay, so first the calendar. Okay, this is the standard calendar table. It's a very simple calendar table, and this is the DAX. The DAX for the that generated this table. So it's a calendar made in DAX. You can also create your calendars in Power Query. It's actually better that you create it in Power Query because then it just runs faster in Power BI, because it does not have to be recalculated and so on, right? So, but for the purpose of the webinars, we are dealing with DAX here. Okay, so we use the add columns function, and we just added a lot of columns here. So the date field was generated with a simple DAX function, calendar auto, and then we have the just the date ID, which is here, just another, instead of the date time format, we also have the date ID, which is actually better. It's more optimal for your model. So make sure that you have your date ID field, and then create all the relationships between your calendar and your fact tables using this data field, this column. Okay. Then we have the year, the month number, month, quarter, and so on. Okay, my standard calendar. Now, on top of that, I have another disconnected table, which is called period calculation. So we have used this technique a lot. Why do we have this table? This is a very simple, short table. And zoom in here. All right. And it just has 3 rows. Okay. So it's basically like a list of all my options for period calculations, for different time calculations that we will use in our reports. So we have just normal month-to-date data, but then we also have year-to-date and full year. Okay, we'll calculate this. And I'm just using this small table to put all my options, period options here. Okay, once I have this table, I can go to my report. And now let's do this. So I'll just remove this here. So we'll just first start building this. Sorry, I can just remove it. Okay, so for now I have a small table here. I have my actuals, my forecast, and my plan, and some variances, variance to plan, and so on. Okay. Then this is the first thing. So now, why do I need the table for period calculation? So this is my table here. These are the 3 options. Okay, actually a couple of fields are hidden here, I guess. To show you in the model. So I have the ID, which is basically just a number, and then I also have a measure here, selected calculation. Okay, just to explain how this works. We did cover this previously a couple of times, but just to make sure that, yeah, calculation ID. So this should be the number, so it's counts. Okay, let's do it like this. All right, so first option, second, third option. So these are my options. This is the table, and now now I can use this as a slicer. This is the first idea. So you can use this table as a slicer. So I'll just add it once more and switch to sorry, there's the slicer here. Okay. So these are now my options, and the idea is, of course, for the user to choose different calculations here, and then he will get, he or she will get the appropriate results, either month to date or year to date or full year. Okay, so this is one idea. You can just use this as a slicer, as a list, or as a drop down, and you can just have it here somewhere on your page like that. Okay, this is one idea. Second idea is to just use this directly in your table to display all of those period calculations in one table. Okay, so now that I have the three calculations, I can actually just click on a table, and I will use this period calculation column, all the three options, to group the table. Okay, and now I have a couple of groups in my table. So the performance for month to date, the year to date performance, and full year performance. Okay, so this is what we wanted. Now, how does this now magically work? Okay, first of all, this is a little measure which returns my selection of period calculation. So if I had the slicer and I would choose the year-to-date option, this formula would return 2, right? Because this was the second option, this ID would be 2, the table would be filtered, and I would get to minimum of 2 is 2, right? The third option for the full year is number 3, right? If nothing is selected, right, then the minimum is the minimum of all the three options 1, 2, 3. So the minimum would be 1. So my default value is actually month to date. So if I don't use this period calculation, you know, on my reports in any of the slicers, filters, and so on, you know, then the basic value number 1. So my month to date is my default. Okay. So this was the first thing. So this measure selected calculation just returns what was which option was chosen. And now we also need to make sure that we return the right values. And how do we do that? We do that by calculating this in a switch statement. So we use the switch statement. Okay, this is the measure that does this, okay, based on my selection. So if my selected calculation was 1, meaning month to date, okay, the measure actually returns the sum of my values, okay? So this is just normal sum, okay? So this is the month to date option. Then for the year to date option, okay, we are calculating, adding up numbers, but this time we also use the dates YTD function. Okay, so dates YTD is the function that returns the year-to-date value. So it will simply add January plus February plus March for March, and then plus April for April, and so on. So this is the function that does this. So you just use calculate, then insert your measure and use dates YTD for year to date. Okay, and then the third option for the full year. Okay, for the full year, what you want to do is actually just simply ignore the selection of your month. All right, so basically ignore the selection of your month and just calculate the sum of your value across all months. Okay, so this is now the third option, full year, right, which is calculated like this. So these are my three options in a switch statement. And now I'm using this measure in my visuals. Okay, actually then on top of that measure, there's another step, because I also have actual and forecast and plan data, right? So then in the end, I need another step here to basically filter my data according to the scenario. Okay, so we covered all that in our first webinar. So this was a quick recap with the third option here for the full year. Okay, so we'll share all the DAX formulas after the webinar, and this is how you get all the three options here. Now there's another trick here, okay, because in a typical business report like this, you would have your data for your actual data for month to date, and you will have it for year to date. You cannot have your actual data for the full year when you're in the middle of the year, right? So you only have like 6 months, 7 months, or 3 months in March and so on, right? So for full year, it does not make sense to display the actual column, okay? So how did we handle this? All right, the idea here is, now this part is specific now for the Zebra BI visuals, because the Zebra BI matrix or table visual here has this option where you can actually hide or show specific columns from a table. So actually, I do have my actuals for the full year as well. Okay, here, and I also have my forecast here on year to date. So this was my initial, year to date forecast, right? And I also had month to date forecast, right? So basically, I added all the measures, but for the full year, I do not want to display my actuals here. That's why I can simply hide this column, the actuals, from full year. Okay, so this is the option that Zebra BI visuals offer. You'll have maybe a small problem how to do that with native table and matrix visuals, but perhaps you can just make the columns very narrow or something like that. But here, if you're using Zebra BI visuals, then simply hide certain columns from any of the groups, right? So you can do this on a level of a group. For the year to date, I will hide forecast. And I'll do the same for month to date. Okay, just hide the forecast. Okay, so this is how I got the performance for the three groups, and this table is now clean and ready. All right, now on to the second issue here, which is when I change my month filter. I want my actuals to reflect the choice. Okay, so April, now the actual data is just shown up until April, right? May, now also May is included. Okay, so based on the selection, my measures for the actuals here somehow returns, the appropriate number of months. Okay, so it's 5 months here and so on. So I'm just getting more periods based on the selection in my slicer. This is the issue, how to do this now. And I mean, why is this even important? I mean, let's just illustrate this. Okay, if you start with a normal chart, let's just do a normal chart here. Just try to build something. Okay, just add my actuals here, and I'll use my months here. All right. What does Power BI do? Well, because I have my monthly selection here, all the visuals are filtered by default. Okay, so it's my June, July. I will always see only 1 month in my chart. It's a huge complication, right? So what do you typically do in this case? Well, the first option is to go to format, navigate here and edit interactions, and make sure that this month filter will not filter the chart here. Okay, so you basically just go here and set the filtering option to none. Okay, all right, so now you've solved this. However, now you will always just see, you know, the data for the full year, or the data, you know, the amount of data that was loaded for this particular year, no matter what your choice is. Now the problem is that, of course, because this chart is not filtered anymore, it cannot be dynamic. It just always shows the data that was put here. Of course, the year filter will still work, which is nice, right? However, maybe it would be better, or in certain cases, you would want to just have exactly all the month up until the choice in your filter. Okay, so what we will do now is the following. So it's a two-step process. Okay, number one, the most important thing is, whenever you have a situation like this, when you're using time filters here, there's no way to dynamically, you know, choose your periods as long as you have just one calendar, because this filter here will always just filter this. So, you know, whenever you have the filter, you'll always just see 1 month. Whatever you do, you know, you can be a DAX ninja, you'll always have this 1 month. Okay, so what we need now is the second calendar. Okay, so that's the trick. That's like 80% of this trick. We now have in our model, we have added another calendar. Okay, so it can be a you know, just a copy of your normal calendar. Okay, I've used just a short one, and I have named it calendar rolling, like a rolling calendar, because we'll also use it for the rolling periods, like latest 13 month and so on. So this is my normal calendar, and then I just have another calendar. This is the DAX to generate this calendar, right? So I just added columns, you know, the dates, date ID, year, month number, and month. I don't need more. I just need the columns or data fields that will be added to my charts, nothing else really. And you do need the month number, because you need to sort your month according to your month number, right? So January is the first month and so on. So you need month number. This is this. So it's basically just the month number from your date, and then the month is the name. Use short names, okay? If you're watching our webinars for the first time, use short names. Everybody else already knows this because they're much more legible in charts and so on. You won't have problems with tilting labels in charts because of the huge, large names and so on. So just use like 3-letter abbreviations. Yeah, so this is my second calendar now. All right, that was the first trick. So instead of putting my month from my original calendar, the one that is already filtered here on my page, I will use the second one, which is not filtered. So I will just take my month, from the second calendar rolling, put it into my category. All right, now I have my month, okay, and now the thing is, okay, let me just first, sorry about this, I better unhide a couple of fields here. So this is my basic measure. It's just called value. Okay, so this is the actual value here. So now we have it on the values. Okay, you see this is the value. So let's just add this here in the values. Okay. All right. Now what we need to do? Now we need to use the DAX, create a measure, and use the DAX to return the my data for the right number of periods. Okay, and this is this measure. Okay, so let me just try to recreate this measure. Okay, you'll add a measure. I named it AC periods. Okay, let's name it AC rolling. Okay, and now we need to calculate my actual data. So I'll just use my existing measure. Sorry, it was called AC, or just do the sum of your values, right? But I already have it here, so I'll use this one. Okay, now I need to get all of the periods up until the selected month. Okay, so we will use the function called dates. So dates in period. This is your function, dates in period. We'll use this one also for rolling periods and so on. It's a very useful function that returns a table with several rows. Okay, it actually generates a table with several rows. That's how you get multiple months. Okay, and you need to start with your date. So you need to find your date from your calendar table, just from your normal calendar. Okay, so this is the first thing here. And then your start date. Okay, what is my start date? I want to get the months from January up until current month. Okay, so I need to get the first date in my year, like the starting date in my year, right? The 1st of January, right? And the function for that is actually called start of year. Okay, just use start of year. It'll be the 1st of January in the current year, the year that was selected, for example. And again, you refer to your date field here. So calendar date. All right, that was my second parameter now. And now you need to return the number of intervals. Okay, and now for the full year, that's 12 months. Okay, so I would use 12 to get all the 12 months, but I actually just need the number of months up until the current selection, right? And how do I get that? I actually already have this in my calendar, right? Because I know that the month of May is my 5th month because I have it in my calendar, right? And you have it in your calendar. I'm sure everybody has the month number, you know, in your calendars. So just use your month number, like month ID or something like that. It's typically called in my model. In my data model, it's actually called month number. Month number, right? Here it is. Okay. So for May, this is 5. For August, it's 8. Very simple. And here you specify the interval. And interval can be a month or a year, because you can do the same thing for years. Okay. For now, we'll just use this for month. Okay, so this will return. Sorry about that. I have another keyboard here. Our offices are being renovated, so I'm using the non-standard equipment here. All right, let's see if this works. Oh no, cannot be. Okay, great. What's the issue here? So you cannot use a single value. So we'll need a function. So let's do the max. Okay, you need an aggregate function for this. So use max of your month number. Okay, now it should work. Let's see this. All right. So this is my new measure. I called it AC rolling, and now let's try this. Just add this measure to my values. Works. It works. Okay, so it's May. May is selected here in my slicer, and I got 5 months. Of course, this will work also for 6, July, and so on. So this is the basic technique. How you get dynamic periods, data periods, time periods on your chart. And now, of course, you can do different things with this. One idea is having basically year-to-date periods, right, up until the current month. Then next thing is with the same technique, you can simply return 12 months. Okay, maybe you want to have a plan and just show it for 12 months. Because you have your plan or your budget for your costs, right? You have it for the full year. Okay, so what you'll do, your next measure will be very similar. So you'll calculate your, okay, this is the forecast. Let's start with the plan. Sorry, I already have this here, so I won't type the DAX again, but it's, you see, calculate your measure for the plan, and then again use dates in period, refer to your date, use start of year, right? Because you want to start with January, at least for this case, okay? And yeah, and so this will be my start of year, and then simply return 12 periods. That's it. 12 intervals and 12 monthly intervals. Okay, instead of month, by the way, you can use year. Okay, so for example, how about having five rolling years? Maybe you have a 5-year plan that starts with the next year or something like that. You know, in this case, you'll just, you know, type 5 and use year, and you know, you'll have your dynamic 5 rolling years that you will control with your filter here. Okay, that would be one thing. Then daily reporting. Okay, we'll cover daily reporting, like daily flash reports and things like that. It's a huge challenge because you know, typically you have your weekly time series, and then you know, it's Tuesday and you only have 2 days. So maybe it's a good idea to show all the 7 days, starting with the last day that you have, like from Tuesday back to the previous Tuesday, for example, or to previous Wednesday. So again, this would be rolling days, either rolling 8 days from the last day, from the same day last week, or 7 days to have the full, like, so that you can compare last 7 days to previous weeks, calendar weeks, for example. So in this case, you would just type 7 here and use days, right? Day like that. Okay, but in my case, I'm actually returning my full plan. All right, remember we wanted all the 12 months. Okay, so this measure will always return all the 12 periods. Now I can use this in my chart here. I just move it to plan. Now let's, you see, now it looks like this. This is the Zero BI visual. This will work also with the native visuals, but of course the charts will be different. Maybe in this case you should also. Okay. Well, this is okay. This is one option, and you can also do the same with your forecast. Okay, because it's much better that you actually add your forecasts. Maybe I have the forecast for the full year, or I have the forecast for the rest of year. Okay, starting from August, starting from September to the end of year. So you can take this and add this to your forecast. All right, and now this is exactly what I actually wanted. You can delete the old one, and this is already my chart. So now it has the actuals go up until the current month, and then the forecast and so on is behind it somehow, right, in the chart. And but it's always the full year forecast and the full year plan. All right, which is really nice. And now Zebra BI, of course, will also let you add things like grand total, for example. One nice thing to have, if you have your actuals, and then behind it you can see actually the full year totals for your forecast and so on. So you can see where you are in the year, or you can even add some comments if you have dynamic commentary. That was we had 2 webinars before that on dynamic commentary and write back commentary. So if you already have your comments in your models like we recommended, now you can, you know, insert some comments here. And I'm just not sure, I think I have one here in April. Do I don't. Okay, it's here, and then you can even display it with a comment box like that. All right, and now this is completely dynamic, so you know this would be now my May and so on, right? So quite nice. Okay, hopefully this will help you create more better reports. The same function, so dates in period, is used for rolling periods. I have shown this. Okay, in my case now I have 13 months here. I'm just using the same function, and it calculates, it just returns 13 months from the current selection. Okay, so you see August, September, September to September, and so on. And this works really nice, you know, with year slicers and so on. So same thing here in my measure. Let's zoom in. My measure, my rolling measure, just calculates my value, and then just uses the dates in period function. Okay, this time what? This is my date from my calendar, and then I'm using the maximum periods. Okay, so this time the logic is slightly different. Okay, I actually find the last date, the maximum date, okay, which is September 2018, right? And then I'm using minus 13. All right, so from my maximum date, from my last date, just 13 months into the past. Okay, so that's exactly the rolling period. Okay, and it can be minus 13. Of course, it can also be minus 12 if you need just, you know, something like this. Okay, now the charts are slightly too small, but now you have it from October here, from October up until September. Okay, so these are your options now. This is how you create your rolling charts. Okay, last 7 days or last 8 days for daily reporting, rolling years, you know, for maybe some strategic reports or dashboards and so on. Okay, this covers dynamic functions. And now I would like to move to fiscal calendars. Okay, this was a frequently requested, you know, feature or, you know, topic that we cover fiscal years, because of course Some of you may have fiscal calendars in your company, so your business year or fiscal year starts with, say, April. Okay, so of course in this scenario, the standard calendar won't be enough, and you need to add a few things to your calendar. Luckily, this is quite easy in Power BI. It's actually very simple, so you can do it for sure. This is my calendar. Okay. Okay, now this was the first part of my calendar. So this is what we had before. We covered that in number of webinars. Okay, so you have your date, and then you have your years, and so on and so on and so on. Now we have a second part of this calendar, which is, you know, the fiscal calendar. Okay, so my fiscal calendar starts with the fiscal year. Okay, this fiscal year is, how do you get the fiscal year? Okay, or maybe I should start with month. Okay, it's probably better. I'll just start with month number. Okay, now what you need to do is you need to get the month. So the function month will return the month number from the date. Okay, so this is your normal month number. Just returns the month number from your date. So March 3, April 4. Okay, now what you need to do, what you want to have in your fiscal calendar is, say your April is start of your fiscal year. Okay, so this function now must return 1 for April, 2 for May, 3 for June, and so on. Okay, and this is exactly what this function does now. Okay, so we will still use the month, okay, but we will not return the month number from April, which is 4. We need to shift this date. Okay, so basically you just shift your whole your dates for the number of months. Okay, and I have this number, so this would be, for say, this would be, say, 3. Okay, this means that you know, March will be your first month. Okay, so this is this number. Okay, instead of, so because I did not want to, you know, put number 3 everywhere, just hard coded, we prepared, actually marked this thing here. So he set up another, as you see here, it's actually we just stored this info in a measure called fiscal shift. Okay, so this measure now actually has the value of 3 or 4 and so on, and we are just using this measure here in the formula. Okay, so this is maybe just because we will of course share all this with you, and then you will just go, I will show you, you will go in the calendar options. You see there's a small little table here, and yeah, you have this value of your shift here. Okay, so this is it. The function that does this is called edate. Okay, so you need to use edate whenever you shift this. So you need to shift your month number. Okay, then you need to shift your year. Okay, because it's not, because for example February can still be last year's you know, fiscal year. Okay, so that's why you need to shift your year numbers, month numbers, all with this function edate. Okay, now the fiscal month, the name of the month stays the same, right? It's still April. Okay, so you just format your normal date, and up to 4 to 3, just get the 3 letters for the name of the month. And then for everything else that you want to have in your fiscal calendar, all the numbers basically, you just need to shift them. So you need to shift the quarters, they're not the same. and you need to shift your fiscal year month as well. Okay, fiscal year month would be 20, let's say 22/01, meaning maybe April, maybe May, maybe March, depending on your shift. Okay, and that's it. That's it. Once you do this, you get your calendar that now looks like this. So let me show the calendar. So now it has a few more months here, and our Mark has actually packed this quite neatly here into a folder called Fiscal Calendar. So you can just, you know, place all of your new fields here. Okay, so this was first part of the trick. Okay, for those of you who will study this from our webinar and so on, you'll see a small table here called Calendar Options. We are building this for something else for the next webinar, okay? Because we also want to have an option where you can simply switch from normal calendar to fiscal calendar, right? Everywhere in your reports, like, you know, your charts will switch and tables will switch from the calendar view to fiscal view. So we are building this already for the next webinar. And now here you see this fiscal shift, okay? So so this is what you need to set up, okay? Right. So use -3 for yeah, start in actually for you start in April, right? So April is 4 -3 will be 1, okay? April will be then yeah, your first month in your fiscal year. Okay, this was the first part. That was setting up your fiscal calendar. Now you have it here. And the second part, and I will, this is the last thing that I want to show you. Okay, what about the measures now? Now you have a calendar that has, you know, your normal calendar, and then it has fiscal month. Okay. Do you need to change anything else, or will your reports just work after you do this? Well, not necessarily. So your basic measures will probably work, but if you're using things like year-to-date and other, you know, year-to-date and then like full year calculations and so on, then you will need to amend those a little bit. Okay, so here on top, you see the normal calendar, January, and so on and so on. Now we can switch to year-to-date, okay? Of course, the year-to-date in a normal calendar, okay? So these are just my normal year and normal month. And here below, I have my fiscal year and fiscal month, okay? The two new columns that we have just calculated with the DAX function, with the eDate function. Okay, so now you see it goes from July to June. Okay, sorry, now this is not completely right. Why? This is now the trick. Okay, so what you need to do now, you see here, for the normal measures, it's okay. Just normal values, you know, just they can be just shifted, that's it. But if you have your year-to-date calculation, then you need to do one more thing here. So in your measures, you need to add, so you can still use the dates YTD function. It calculates the year-to-date. However, there's another option here, another parameter for this function, right? Which is start of basically end of your period. Okay, so in my case, because it's March, so it's yeah, it needs to be 3, right? Okay, sorry, 4. No, it was sorry, it was okay, but just my values are somehow strange. Not sure.
Actually, it was correct. So this one for the end of year, and you should just place third, so the March, but 31st, and the same for the comparison measures. So that parameter in the dates year to date.
Yeah. Okay. There are also, of course, others. I just did this for actuals, right? But of course, we have two measures, and now here the visual has the plan and forecast measure. Thanks, Mark. It looked very weird. Okay, but I just wanted to make this point, okay, that you need to amend your measures and make sure that you will calculate your year-to-dates and full years and so on with the right with the right months. So use this function. Okay, so now your year-to-date measures will be different, and that's why I now have two measures in my model. Okay, I needed to duplicate my measures, okay, which is kind of the simplest way, but my initial measure was like this, month to date, year to date. So you see dates YTD, it's exactly the same function, only this time click back to my fiscal measure. Okay, it has this additional. I'll just put it back to 6 so that it looks nicer. And yeah, so this is the change without the parameter, with the parameter. Okay, so to recap, for the fiscal years, add those measures, add those columns to your calendar. Okay, add those measures. We'll just share the DAX, but you can do the same thing in Power Query as well. In DAX, use the edate function to shift your calendar for the right number of months, and that's it. And then just repeat all the measures that you will need in your reports. Okay, that's number one. Number two, make sure to check all of your year-to-date calculations and maybe some other time functions as well, that you'll add up the right things. That's it. Otherwise, this is quite straightforward. And yeah, for the dynamic axis, use the dates in period function. Okay, where you can just shift. You can dynamically return as many periods as you would like, starting from the start of year for a number of periods, or starting with the end of year, going a few periods back. That would be an option for the rest of year, right? You take the end of the year and then say minus maximum of your date, for example, and you'll get the rest of your year. Okay, or do minus 13 for 13 months and so on, or 5 would be in the future, right? So 5 from this date, like 5 years. Okay, yeah, or into the past with a minus here. All right, okay, I hope that these examples were practical enough for you to use. All right, let me know what you think, and yeah, please let me know if you have any questions. I'll be here for 15 more minutes to answer any questions. Mark, can you help me with that?
Yes, absolutely. So there's a lot of questions. Of course,
that's great.
We hopefully will be able to tackle all of them, but if not, of course, we'll be following up after the session. So don't you worry. But let's just start with one of the let's say things that you started. So why should we link the timetable with the fact one with ID if date is already a unique key? So why are we using the primary key?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's a really great question. It works the same. So functionally it's completely the same. And even you will see us, I mean, because it's, you know, it's easier just to have the date and just make a relationship, you know, with your dates. And we had this in all of our, you know, previous, you know, demos and so on, right? Because in reality, if you have a small model and you load the data, you know, it does not really matter. Where it does matter is if you have a huge data model with, you know, millions of rows and so on, and the performance is important to you. Okay, this is one little step in performance optimization, because the date ID will be is shorter. Okay, so if you have it like that, sorry, too many things open here, but yeah. So basically, you see date in Power BI is, you know, it's date time, and date ID is just shorter because it's always like 6. Do I have it here or not? Where is it? Should be somewhere. Maybe it's not here in this. Okay, we don't even have it here. You see in this, you know, just little examples. But in a real model, I would have it, and I would have six characters. Okay, so that's always, you know, sorry, eight characters, right? Year, month, and date. That's 8 characters, and it's fixed and it works. It's just faster, slightly, but still, you know, when you add these things up, add all the things up, you'll end up with a faster data model and faster reports, of course. Right. Sorry, now I can't hear you, Mark.
Excuse me. Yes. So, yes, it's due to performance reasons, right? The daytime relationships between the fact and dimension tables don't have the best compression, so that's the reason.
Yep.
We want to have the integers. So is there also a quarter to date or half year to date function in Power BI?
Quarter to date. Quarter to date or year to, I'm not sure. That was very that was a highly requested feature. So I'm not sure. I would have to Google this myself if they, because DAX is changing, you know. So I would actually need to check.
Yes, I think there is an option for the quarter to date solution. So
I think it should be. Sorry.
And the syntax should be the same, I believe, as for the year to date.
Yeah. Total quarter to date, is this it, Mark? So
yeah, that's one of them, but there's also the dates quarter to date.
Okay, dates QTD, right? So like exactly the same. All right, thank you so much, Mark. So QTD. So Mark is our #1 DAX specialist here. So Mark, you just go ahead. Voila, here it is. Dates QTD. Okay.
I believe you were explaining that it is possible to use the calculation group with ZipVI visuals.
Yeah, absolutely. Use it. Use it for like period calculations. This thing that so it's basically more or less the same concept as disconnected tables in your DAX model. So in all of our webinars, we use disconnected tables wherever we are using disconnected tables, like for switches, for certain switches, for different time calculations, things like that. Yeah, you can use calculation groups for that. There's one limitation, because the question was, how does it affect the visuals? One limitation at the moment is that if you're using calculation groups to return different units, okay, some people do that, and it's a really nice idea. Okay, you can have a calculation group with options for like thousands, millions, billions, and so on. So basically units, okay? Use calculation groups for that. And then based on that, you actually change the format of the number, right? Not the number itself, like not dividing it by 1,000 or something like that, but actually just formatting it. In this case, the format is not returned to custom visuals. So that's a limitation for custom visuals at the moment, and this limitation has been lifted. Okay, so this will work with version Zebra BI, with one of the next versions. So not the next one, but the next one. So 6.0, and then all the limitations will be gone, and really nice to use calculation groups.
Okay, and the next question is, do these advanced DAX formulas work with non-Zebra visuals as well? So yes, so vice
absolutely.
versa.
Absolutely. I mean, everything that we show in, I mean, most of the things that we show here, of course, will work with any custom visual and yeah, any native visual. So for example, just click here, you see, I mean, it will work. So month, year to date, it's just a different, you know, it's just a different display.
Okay, and just a quick remark here. So for the bottom one, if we just switch the fiscal shift measure in the calendar options
Yes.
to -6, I think it should display the correct way.
Yes.
Because this was meant for the fiscal calendar starting in June, right?
Yep.
And now you have the proper display.
Now it's okay. Yes. So two things for fiscal calendars, like the shift in your fiscal calendar, and then use the same like shift in your year-to-date or other time calculation functions.
Yes, this was one of the questions. So how does the end of year date in the fiscal measure, so the 30th of June, actually help you with this? So this is actually for calculating this total year to date. So Andre, if you can just show the actual fiscal. Yeah, this one, yeah.
So for the year to date, you don't need the end of year. You use the function dates YTD, and then add.
This is optional, yes.
This is an optional parameter here. Okay, so without, normally you would just say year to date. Okay, and it would be from January up until current month. Okay, from January to April. But if you have a fiscal year, then you need to add this second option here, which is, you see, year-end date. Okay, so you type the year-end date, and you need to type it as a text constant. Okay, like this. So you need to say, all right, this will be, it needs to be a text like that. So this is your end month and end day. Okay, so that's June 30th.
So yeah, your fiscal year now starts in July the 1st, right?
Exactly, and ends on the last day in June.
Okay, so moving on to the next question, could you show the forecast DAX measure, probably the original one, just the basic one?
The original, okay, it's all right. The forecast is the forecast. It's the forecast in our example here is just a separate set of data. Data, it's not calculated or something like that. It's not, we don't do anything special with this data. So the forecast is actually generated outside of the report in the data, you know, in the data, it's actually part of some planning procedure, and you know, at least in this example. So it's like a monthly or a quarterly forecast that is loaded into the Power BI model from outside. Okay, and then once it's loaded, we just simply display it. And now here, this is a special function of the Zebra BI visuals. Okay, so this is how do you display it. Now this is a trick thing here, right? So for example, you know, this display where the actuals run up until the current year, and then for the rest of the year you have your forecast, right? And then the forecast is kind of, you know, it's like it has this hatched pattern and so on. This is a function of the Zebra BI visual. Okay, so you can use the normal chart. I don't know, probably not the stacked one. I would probably use something like the clustered, right? But it's, you know, it's your typical chart. So here it would look like this. It would still work, right? The actuals are now like green. You see everything works, but just the display is just not so so optimal, right? So especially for business reporting and so on. So Zebra BI uses things like, it has this the so-called segmented chart. So you see the forecast goes yeah, up until the current month, and then, you know, then you have the dotted line if it's a line chart or area chart. It can be a simple line chart like this one, or even more simple if you have just actual and forecast. Sorry. Yeah, now I would need to yeah, I would need to change it. Okay.
Okay, so maybe jump to the other examples. So the income statement. When you have many charts in the report, when you are showing the small multiples,
Okay.
There was a question: do you recommend changing the month format from 3 characters to 1? For example, when we saw that some clipping occurs if you have multiple.
Yes, I do.
Small multiples.
Yes, I absolutely do. I do. That was a great observation. So because, I mean, what did I do now? Nah, but you see, I mean, you have this problem. Even if you have just 3 letters, okay, that's much better than having the whole name, like December, November, and so on. 3 letters is much better. But once you go to extremely small charts, which is, you know, small multiples, things like that, you need to make it even cleaner. You know, clean is your word, clean. And yes, use one letter. However, you will have an issue in your calendar. Let me just quickly just address this. Now here I actually have monthly periods. I don't have a calendar in this one. So this one has like a normal calendar. All right, calendar. Okay, so you can do something like, sorry, it's very simple. For 1 letter, you know, just type this and use M. I'll just do it. Now you will have an issue. Remember? So sorry, M will not work because I just wanted to check this. You'll actually need to format. You'll probably need to do something similar to.
Actually, I believe that we already have a solution. So in the tips and tricks example,
Yeah,
there's a field called month short, and this, I believe, is exactly the solution for this one.
Yeah, because I was doing that. Okay, so here in this case, you can just use the write function. right function to get the first letter, right? But then, so let's take right of the month, right of the, so that would be, so like month and date, sorry, month and then the date field, right? So like that, and just take one letter. Now, the solution, where do we have it, Mark?
In the sales and tips and tricks example, I believe, in the standard calendar.
Great.
In the calendar, yeah, it's month short, right below the month.
Short.
It's a calculated column actually, so it's not
sorry.
in this formula. Yeah, this one.
Okay.
This actually.
Okay, good. So you see, oh yeah, left, not right. So you want to take, so for month, for the short month, just one letter. Okay, it's a little bit tricky. So you take just the left from your, from your month. Okay, so basically just the first letter. Now, what is the issue here? If you just do that, if you just take this one letter, you will have a couple of months with the same first letter. April and August, and June and July. They will both be, they will both be actually like merged into the same letter. Okay, and what you will see in charts, in some charts or in most charts in visuals, they will have a problem with that, because Power BI will start to aggregate your data and will just sum up the sales from June and July into one J letter. Okay, so that's your issue. So how to solve it? You need to make sure that the names are actually different, but they look the same. Okay, so what you want to do is still have the letter, but then add something behind the letter that is invisible. Okay, and what is invisible? It's an invisible character. Okay, an invisible character is this. Okay, so this is the character number 8203. Okay, and you use the unichar function. It returns this character. It's basically space that is invisible. Okay, it's an invisible space. And then what do? Because it needs to be unique, you repeat this letter behind each month. For February, for F, you repeat it once, and then for March, you have 2 blank spaces, and for the next month, you have 3 blank spaces, right? And that's how you make absolutely sure that all the categories are actually different, but you still have just the first, you would still see just the first letter. And because this is a completely invisible space, it does not take even 1 pixel. It's actually 0 pixels. Everything will be, your rendering will be perfect. Yep. Thanks, Mark, for reminding me. So we played around with this years ago, so I forgot. But yep, great.
Okay, and while we're on the formats, there was also a question of what does the backslash do in the calendar table for quarter formatting. So the backslash basically assigns the yeah.
No, backslash there is used for I'm still playing around with this. You see, so this is the monthly, okay, but I would need to sort it. Yeah, backslash is used for escaping, basically. Okay, so your quarters, how do you want your quarters to look in your reports? Okay, in most cases, people want to have it like this: Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, right? That's the most standard, I would say, notation for quarters, right? So what you can do is you can without this, if you just say format date as Q, as quarter, what will you get? enter. Sorry, I deleted. Sorry, that was the unfinished business here. So right, voila. Okay, so you see, Q just returns the number of the quarter, 1, 2, 3. Okay, you want to have the Q so that people understand that these are quarters, right? So there are two ways how to do it. You can do it like that and just concatenate the sorry. Oh, this keyboard is killing me. Okay, so you can concatenate the letter Q with the number, with the quarter number, and this would give you Q2, Q3, right? But if you want to show your colleagues that you're a DAX ninja, then you do this \Q, right? And what this does is it actually adds the letter Q, right? But because this does not work, this just returns quarter three, because Q means quarter. You need to escape this function. So by adding the \, you will tell Power BI that it needs to take the letter Q as the character Q, and this is how we now have the first one is the letter Q, and the second one is the number of the quarter. So this is the shortest way how to get your quarters into calendar in DAX.
Okay, I know.
Okay, last one, Mark. Let's take one.
Yeah.
Nice one.
Let's take one more, but the rest we'll try to answer later on.
Yep.
So if the fact table has only a period and year dimension, so not the exact date, is it possible to connect it to a date table and use the time intelligence functions?
Sorry, I did not catch this.
So, yeah, so if we have a fact table that does not have a date field, but it has the, let's say, period and year dimension, can we still use the date table?
Yes. Well, you need to make sure. Yes, you can. You can. You absolutely can. You only need to make sure that the relationship that you will build between your fact table and your dimension uses the same field. Okay, and it's probably the easiest if you just have like month and years in your fact table. Then your probably the easiest solution is to build this date ID function, date ID field. So you just add a date ID. So you take your month, your year, your month, and then you just add 01. Okay, this will be then the first day in each month, 1st of January, 1st of, so you just add 01, and then you'll get this date ID, and then you can make a relationship to your calendar table. Yeah, and that'll work. That works quite nicely, so no problem.
Exactly right, and the purpose of the calendar table is actually to leverage all those time intelligence functions, because you have to have a continuous date, right? And this is why we're doing this. So
yes, this is important. So I mean, even if you have simple data in one table and so on, add the calendar table, because sooner or later you'll need your year-to-dates and everything else. And if you have your calendar table, you know, the visuals will work as is expected everywhere in Power BI and so on and so on. So there are tons of reasons why you should use the calendar table. And then of course you can do all the stuff that we have shown today. And yeah, hopefully that will give you take your reports and dashboards to completely different level, hopefully, right? Okay, guys. Thank you, Mark, so much. That was a great discussion. We are available for you, so you can follow up with me or Mark. Here are some of the channels. So LinkedIn, you know, just add us on LinkedIn and just type us a question on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest one. or send us an email. So this is my email here. Mark's email is also there, or just just reply to the emails that you got for the webinar. Also, if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to subscribe now, because the next webinars are coming, and yeah, we'll have some big announcements very soon. So follow us. Some really exciting things, something even better than the webinars. Cheers, guys.
Cheers, everyone.